Hi, I'm Deb Miller. I'm the director of the Public Management Center at the University of Kansas. I'm pleased to introduce this webinar series. We've missed engaging with you live and in person. Who knew something so common could now feel so precious and valued? Though not live and in person, we hope these webinars will provide you with a convenient outlet to continue learning, and in this now daily virtual way, connecting with other public sector professionals. Because they are pre-recorded, you can view the webinars as your schedule allows, share them with others if you choose, and listen to key points more than once. Each of our speakers has offered to make themselves available to answer your questions. If you have questions, please leave them in the chat or in the comments below. We will either connect you with the presenter or respond to you with an answer. Here at the PMC, we believe that public service lies at the heart of democracy. During these strange, uncertain times, you are doing democracy in ways you never imagined and finding workarounds you never expected to need. We salute you and hope that in some small way, we can support and assist you in your work.
Well, I can tell people, and I have in the information that's listed, that you are a senior trainer with KU HR, but I know a little bit more about your background, but I thought I would let you introduce yourself, because then you can say what feels relevant to you thinking about the Emerging Leaders Academy.
Okay, great. Well, I have 15 to 20 years experience in nonprofits and state government, doing training, doing communications, things like that. And in nearly every one of my jobs, I've had connections and worked with government employees, whether it's attorneys or social workers or just administrators. And then about 4 years ago, I ended a 2-year stint at the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. And so I downtown Topeka in a state office building. And so I have that experience being a state employee. And then since then, I've been here at KU for 4 years doing trainings and a lot of it on compassionate communication. But I really appreciate working with government employees. I think they get a bad rap, but I've found in my experience that they're passionate, they're willing to think of the bigger picture and the social good in their projects. And so I have connected with them in that way, because that has always guided me in the job choices I've made as well.
Yeah, and it's one of the things I most love about the work we do at the PMC is that we really get to individually and know all of those things on a daily basis, rather than having to just sort of think about the idea that there might be dedicated people in there, but believe what the news says and all that. So
absolutely, that's my experience.
And so I know that communication, I mean, it's a phrase that by name, people can sort of guess a little bit about what's going on with it, but there's quite a lot there. And it's been, I think, increasingly on demand as a workshop at KU. I know you've really increased the amount of times it's been offered over the last few years. Could you say a little bit about how you came across the idea of it, or the fact that it was a thing and sort of an approach, and what some of the things that attracted you to that idea and that approach are?
Sure. I was just perusing downtown Lawrence bookstore, The Raven, 4 summers ago. And I just pulled it off a shelf and it looked intriguing. And it happened to be the founder, Marshall Rosenberg's introductory basic overview book called Nonviolent Communication, The Language of Life. And once I got it home, it was just one of those books that spoke to me that I wanted to read cover to cover. There's a lot of activities in there, and I did all the activities. And it just really interested me. And yes, at KU, jump, 9 months or something like that ahead, where I started to develop curriculum about various trainings, and I got the okay from my supervisor to start trainings on compassionate communication. And for 2 years, myself and a colleague at KU have done the Introduction to Compassionate Communication 3-hour class once a month at least. It's our most popular class. We used to do it quarterly. Other classes we do quarterly. This class we do once a month, and then we also go out on request across campus to groups of folks in the same departments and do the intro for them. I've never been associated with a training that has gotten so much feedback, and the people who have taken the trainings asked us for more. And so now me and my colleague meet with them once every other week just to discuss compassionate communication and talk about how they're trying to integrate it and share the challenges and the successes. What spoke to me, I think, sorry?
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, I know that when I was very attracted to the description of the class, and then once I attended, I came back and told everybody in my unit that they should all go take the class too. And I know that people were interested, and I don't know if they've been able to do that yet, but I can see why it got so popular. People had the same response I did, because it really was such a different framework. So, which I guess then, if you want to go ahead and tell us about like what are some of the approaches in it, or what is the sort of difference of what happens in that mode of communication.
Okay. Yeah, and real briefly, I hear that all the time, that one person has come to the class and then go back and tell their coworkers. And so I think that's why it's been so popular, because the word of mouth has been tremendous. One basic thing about compassionate communication is we're trying to communicate, getting to a place where I can communicate and interact with you out of a place that leads to and inspires compassion, connection, and generosity. But how do you do that? And so for years and years, whenever I got in a difficult conversation, or someone disagreed with me, or I wanted to disagree with someone else, or ask for my needs to be met, I would just get really nervous and tongue-tied. And what caught me with this is it gave me tools to be able to build confidence, to ask for what I want, but in a way that doesn't dog other people and doesn't lead to, and doesn't criticize other people. Like, I can share what I need, what I want in a way that is more palatable to people who are listening to me, that doesn't lead to defensiveness or counterattack or withdrawal or submission. And it doesn't focus on all these moralistic judgments to get my needs met. And so what I learned is I relate to people through judgment. It's just the human in me.
I think it's human to do that, right? I mean, we're always sort of assessing what we think of people's statements and what they're doing and all of that. It just is there.
Yes, absolutely. That is one thing that'll always be there. It means our brains are working. Our brains create these thoughts. But there are two different types of judgments. One is the value judgments we use every day to keep us safe, to know what to eat, to know how to take care of our kids, make it safe when we drive, let us decide what TV show to watch. Those are just signifier judgments. They have no implication of wrong or rightness. The judgments I'm talking about that I now are aware of that can alienate and disconnect me from someone else and cause someone else to hear criticism are moralistic judgments. And any moralistic judgment just implies that what you're doing is wrong. Mm-hmm. And I am there to prove that I am right and just to describe how you're wrong in order to get what I want. And this is this is a paradigm shift for me. And in this particular way, Marshall, the founder, says this is the big difference. Is I no longer focus on trying to describe how I don't like what you're saying, how I don't like what you're doing, how I don't like what the situation is. Rather, I focus instead on figuring out what's happening with me in the moment, my needs, my feelings, and how can I ask for what I need in a way that isn't criticizing, that isn't analyzing your behavior and telling you, well, that was dumb, or that was neurotic, or moralistic judgments like you're being unprofessional. That's inappropriate. You're not a team player, Noel. You're angry. You're too sensitive. All these words we've been conditioned to use to get our point across. And we are all PhDs. We all have doctorate degrees on this classification system, all these words. What I found that was so different and then what caught me was I no longer have to focus on using that to communicate. And I also examined how I communicate, and found that when I use that type of language, it actually disconnects me from people. And it actually doesn't help me form compassion and connection with them. I don't feel like I don't have a generosity of spirit when I think of you during a conversation that you are not a team player, Noel. And I keep focusing on that, and how I think and how I listen to you and how I speak totally informs and is a huge influence on my well-being and how I show up in interactions. So compassionate communication had me like that, because it's saying a totally different way to communicate my thoughts, not through moralistic judgments, but through describing how I am, and have my focus move, my attention move to thinking about needs and feelings, one and two, and then knowing that I am there to connect with you. I have no,
The baseline goal.
That's the goal. Connection, connection, connection. I don't have to change you. I don't have to make sure you're doing one right thing. I don't have to prove myself. My intent is just to connect with you. I'm not there to give you advice. Sure, all these things can happen eventually in a conversation, but right away, I don't need to do that anymore, because that doesn't serve me. That doesn't serve connection.
That is so interesting. So there's just a really interesting clarity of purpose there.
Yes.
That, I guess frequently we feel as though we're clear about our purpose, but the purpose is much more about getting somebody else out of the way, or to address this thing that's like right in front of us, rather than you're saying there's this underlying point here that is connecting.
Yes, and that's what I didn't have. I didn't ever have a purpose. I never have like guides or aids. This guides me. It's like my guidepost just aids me in figuring out how I want to say and show up. Because now I know I'm an empathetic person, and I used to think that I needed to feel everyone's feelings in the room, or your feelings as we talk. I can resonate with those feelings because I've had them in the past, but I don't have to feel them. I can just hold space for you. I don't have to take all that over. And that's another way that compassionate communication has just put this weight off of my shoulders.
That is so interesting. And so I just want to note, like, even as you're talking about it, it's really interesting, like how much clearer passion you have for it. I mean, it's just very clear that it's been really transformative for you. And that was so meaningful that you wanted to, create this course even. And let me just ask one quick side thing. You said the book was called Nonviolent Communication. And so is the idea then that these kinds of judgments, or these things where we're trying to sort of change people and then they provoke sort of combative responses, that's the violence, quote unquote, is that the idea, and we're trying to step outside of that? Because I think it's a different way of using violence as a term and nonviolence than maybe what we would picture.
Exactly. That's exactly right. If you think of violent language as anything that leads to hurt and disconnection and alienation between you and me, that's violent. At KU, we decided not to use nonviolent communication. It's also known as compassionate communication. We thought for various reasons that would sit well with people.
It's a little more accessible maybe, because we don't think of ourselves as having violent communication maybe, and so why would I need nonviolent communication?
Exactly. So that's why we made that choice to use that language.
Nice. Well, cool. So you sort of, this was very close around the edges of what you were saying, but could you offer an example of the difference that made in some conversation and sort of how you imagine it might have gone versus how it went once you had this tool?
Sure. And so, and I am passionate about this because it's worked for me, and I've practiced this for 4 years. And just so you know, I didn't know anyone else personally who did this. So my first year and a half, I was using this and practicing it without saying anything. It was all these internal processes. And so an example of how compassionate communication can not only help, as you speak to another human being, but also how I think and how I judge myself. So an example would be the other day, I got a Outlook meeting request from someone across campus in a totally different department. but it had no information about it. All it was a 2-word title, and there was no explanation of what the meeting was about, why I was invited. I had not talked with this this colleague across campus for over a year. And when I did work with her, it was very superficial, periphery. And so for whatever reason that day, my reaction was reactivity, and I was pissed off. It wasn't anger. It was more really frustration. And the minute I read—
We all don't have enough going on, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's only human. And now I know, as human beings, we're social animals. There are so many opportunities throughout the day for us to get activated like this and become reactive and defensive. And so I noticed in that moment when I saw the meeting invite, I was like, why did she send this to me? I have no idea what she's talking about. Why didn't she give me more information? This isn't a good way to build relationships across campus. And I was just like, oh.
I can almost feel, my own reaction that would be very similar, I think, at a moment like that. Yeah.
And it's like, not only this meeting invite, but, sometimes when you get emails that seem to be mean or something like that. So it was just whatever. It was a quick, I wasn't even realizing I was doing it, but I was reacting to it. In the past, I probably would not have asked her follow-up questions or asked for clarity, or I would just sit in my resentment and stew and poo about it for the week before the meeting and wonder about it. And I might talk to my coworkers about it and say, can you believe this happened? Without knowing that is me being reactive, and I'm not connecting. I'm not in any way, I'm bringing all this negativity to the workplace by doing that. And it's seeping out through how I talk to my coworkers, but there's just me and my whole energy and for the rest of the day. So before, I would have let it affect me like that, and it would have seeped out. But with compassionate communication, I have the tools now and the words and a purpose. So I know what to say. So all I did was, once I recognized what I was doing, I took a deep breath. I paused for a moment. I'm very well practiced at pausing, taking a deep breath, being centered, and recognizing, okay, I don't like what she did, but that's not the point. The point is I need some needs met, and I'm going to ask it in a way that is not disconnecting. So I email her back, and I basically say, I have it here. Hey, I noticed your meeting request, and I'm a bit confused, and I would like some clarification. Mm-hmm. Could you give me more information on the background of the meeting, and why you would want me there, and maybe what you thought my role was during the meeting? So can you tell me more about that?
Right.
In that email, I used 4 of the tools that compassionate communication provides for us. I made an observation that didn't focus on the fact that the meeting, how she sent it to me, was wrong, and
it's starting off by saying, your meeting request had no information, or like a statement that just, right, yes, which I suppose you could say is an observation, but there's an observation that's helpful and maybe one that's kind of more provocative.
Correct. Yes, everything is in the service of connection. So that's all I go back to. Will this connect with her?
So interesting.
Yeah. And then I shared that I was concerned, I think, or confused. That's a feeling. And then I told her what I wasn't getting, which was clarity and information, and that was a need. Mm-hmm. And then I just made a request. The great thing about compassionate communication is I feel more confident in making requests about asking people to do things or tell me something or whatever. And all I did was ask her, can you tell me more about XYZ? That was it. Mm-hmm. And I left it at that. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have any type of, the feel of some emails or can be snooty or snippy or defensive or whatever. I didn't imply that she was wrong in any way.
You weren't trying to prove a point. You were really just trying to meet what you needed.
Absolutely. So I was no longer focused on the fact that she did this to me, and I'm mad about it. It's like,
Right.
that doesn't serve me, my connection. And 4 years of doing this, I am so much more calm now. I am so much less reactive, because now I know I'm just not going to care about how she says something to me or what, because I'm not agreeing with it. It just doesn't serve me well, and it doesn't serve connection and compassion.
Yeah.
And so it's less likely to lead to her wanting to cooperate with me. And so that little email was compassionate communication.
Gotcha. Well,
So
and
compassionate, yeah. Go ahead.
No, actually, go ahead, Laurie. I'm sorry.
Oh, this is just an example of compassionate communication can help in 3 modes. It can help with self-connection and self-empathy. So when I got reactive, I was like, oh, I'm reactive now. I'm ticked off. What's happening? I'm feeling frustrated because I'm
Noticing
needing
yourself.
clarity.
Yeah.
Yes. So even before I interacted with any other human being, I did this internal work, this inner work. So that's
Yep.
self-connection. When I decided to, and then what I did was I really quickly thought of, well, what was she needing? She probably just wanted to have a meeting to get some more information or clarity on some issue. I was like, okay, so that's empathy. So that's my consciousness with her. And then third, self-expression. I was able to, because I was in a good place, who had done the inner work to make that, to reply with that email. So there's 3 modes of communication that this is helpful for. And I used all 3 in just that. And I didn't have to talk to another human being or anything like that.
Well, and, that whole thing was so interesting to hear, because, there may be people, in the class who are like, yeah, you would just ask for clarification, no big deal. And so, there's a whole range of how we would respond, but to sort of be really deliberate about asking for clarification, even if all this is just happening for you in just a couple of minutes, you're going, no, wait, so how am I going to ask for this in a way that also doesn't cause greater problems for either of us? Right?
Absolutely.
It's interesting to imagine sort of just that quick email response, or, not immediate, but I'm sure that didn't take you very long after you'd had sort of 4 years of practice of thinking this through. And not that I'm also saying that, and I don't think you say this in the class, not that you need 4 years of experience to be able to pause and do that, but it's sort of like any time that we can remember that maybe there's a new set of tools that we have, and pause and think about, how can I bring this in here? Do I agree with the fact that connection would matter above all? It sure seems like it would help things, and so then that's a very different place to start from.
Absolutely. And, this might be similar to other types of communication people have heard about, like emotional intelligence. This is, definitely where I want to go, how I've developed my emotional intelligence through this work. But other people in the country, in other areas, have talked about being empathetic. It's been researched now about how important emotional intelligence is in our leaders and things like that. If you know Brene Brown, the researcher, who's an Oprah friend, she has a ton of books. She has a free Netflix
the
special.
Most popular TED Talks ever. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. On vulnerability. She says it like, what story am I telling myself? Classic example here of what happened to me. I reacted. I was telling a story to myself that how dare that other person waste my time by sending me this invite without telling me anything. Now I have to follow up. Now I'm mad. This is annoying. So that was the story I was telling myself. And compassionate communication gives me the tools, right, to disrupt after I have that story I'm telling myself, to stop, slow down, figure it out, so I don't engage in a way that will alienate or lead to disconnection.
Great. The last thing I noticed about that example that I'll comment on is the fact that when people hear the term compassionate communication, I think it's easy to go down a path that assumes something really touchy-feely.
Right.
And there was nothing in that email that was touchy-feely. Yeah. It was just being clear and not being provocative, maybe, or, not making assumptions about what her intentions were, and just describing your own perspective and what you needed. But there wasn't anything there about, hey, it will be great to connect, or, like which I think is maybe, we assume maybe a softness to compassion sometimes, that I think is actually, compassion is very difficult, to prioritize and to remember to use in moments like that. And so it just really emphasizes the fact that it's not a touchy-feely, soft thing.
Thank you for saying that. I'm so knee deep in the work that I forget that people might think that way if you don't know the work, because I don't think it's touchy-feely at all. You're right, I was direct, but I was direct in a respectful way that focused on what I was needing, period. Right. I didn't focus on judging her in any way. And also soft skills, I know that phrase has been around for decades. My colleague here at KU, D.A. Graham, likes to call them strategic skills. And so that's how I call them now, strategic skills.
I'm totally going to use that, because we struggle with that at the PMC. Almost everything we do is soft skills, but they're not soft. They're the things that make you able to get your work done, right? And in ways that you can have all the technical skills in the world, but if you're making people annoyed and mad or frustrated all the time, it's not going to help anything.
Absolutely, and research tells us that the technical skills aren't the reason why people often leave or get fired. It's how you show up at work. You can learn technical skills, but how you show up at work, these strategic skills, communication, is often what we're not skilled at. It's often what we're not schooled at. It's often not what's prioritized in our formal education as we're growing up.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, having a mind meld moment with Laurie, I'm all over the same thing. So,
and so one more thing about touchy-feely and feelings. All these are guides, they're aids. They're not telling you how to talk or what to do. This is all a choice. Compassionate communication is choiceful. So if there's ever a time that you don't want to share a feeling with someone because you're uncomfortable or you think the other person will not hear it well, you don't have to share feelings. Number two, there are so many feelings words out there. You don't have to go knee deep in feelings that are very emotionally reactive to you at work. So you might not want to say that you're scared at work, but you might say concerned. Or you might not want to say that you're sad at work, but you might use discouraged. Or you might not want to say you're ashamed, you might use disheartened. So I have this list that I keep at my desk.
Wow.
Because I don't think I'm ready to get really, really deep into feelings at work either. But there's a huge feelings vocabulary that you can use that match the emotional state that you're in and that match what you choose to share in a particular moment with a particular coworker. And so just so you know, this isn't all about feelings and like you said, being touchy-feely at all. It's not that. I hope I was clear about that.
I think so. And I think I heard in there also the fact that there's room for your own personality. So if you are more touchy-feely and people are used to that from you, and that's just who you are and that's how you connect with people, maybe this offers you the possibility to consider whether others want as much touchy-feeliness, but meanwhile you're still going to adjust what words you choose and how you put them in sentences according to something that feels.
That's absolutely it. Absolutely. Yeah. And just like anything else, context is everything. There are no hard and fast rules of how you're going to communicate every day with your spouse. Context is everything. In every communication interaction, there's the power differentials. There's how you're feeling that morning. If you're having a crappy morning, it's how I think about the other person based on what the experiences I've had with them in the first place. So this is about building your emotional intelligence to know how I want to show up in a conversation. If that means sharing a feeling or two, great. If it doesn't, that's fine too. Yeah. And this is such a radical departure from how we've been conditioned to communicate. It's like learning a new language. So it's going to take time and practice. I mean, if you try to pick up a language in high school, because we're not multilingual. Well, like Spanish, for example, I practice and practice and practiced. So it's just like that. You're unlearning habitual ways to respond that are disconnecting, that might lead to defensiveness and counterattack and fight, flight, or freeze. And you're relearning a totally different paradigm to communicate. But one more thing based on what you said, you don't have to know all of this to jump right in. Like I said, I did this 1.5 years by myself, working on my inner work and starting to learn to hear people differently, because I'm no longer focusing on why I think what they said is wrong or right. I'm focusing on, well, what are they needing right now and feeling maybe that they're acting this way? Because we believe a basic concept in compassionate communication is that everything we say and do is to meet a need. That has opened my compassion to everyone I meet now, to know that they're just doing the best that they can with what the resources they have to meet some type of need. And we think needs are shared among all of us humans. And that to me has opened the door for me to have to be compassionate with people.
Well, and it's a perfect lead into one of the other things that I wanted to ask you about, which is what this approach offers at this particular moment in time. Because we've already been in a very anxious space in general for the last 3 months or so, and then you add an overlay of this national reaction and individually our reactions to this last 5 or 6 days, and actually I guess it's been a week, the killing of George Floyd and all the way that just churned up so many things. And for me, the conversation, or not the conversation, I guess, my own how I would move forward already shifts when I'm thinking about the idea of watching all of the responses that anyone has and asking that question about what do they need, or what are they, wait, how did you just say that question?
What are they
needing? Yeah, just what are they needing? And so, at a moment where there's a pandemic, if somebody feels the need to still go out in the streets, to raise an issue, there's a need there, I think is what you're saying. And that is a really different way of looking at things. And then, as law enforcement has to navigate that individually and in a larger context, if we're thinking about, what do they need? There's a different opening there. But
thank you.
I'll just stop there so you can comment on that.
Well, I hope people were hearing what you were saying and paying attention, because that's it. And you might not have been trying to do this as long as I, but if you could experience what it's like to focus on needs instead of everything else, a needs-based communication. And I'm so glad that's your experience. It opens you up. And that is the start of compassion and connection with them, and to see them as human beings. So I'm so glad you said that, because I can't say it any better, but if you want me to add some stuff.
Well, there's just a different thing that's going on if you're not trying to assert that your side is right and somebody else's side is wrong, I guess is the only other thing I would say. And then you're welcome to add anything you'd like to on that.
This helps. This helps me know that I matter. And this gives me the words to show to other people that they matter too. And so whether we're talking about George Floyd's death, or what you didn't like about a staff meeting, this builds from a base of compassion and acknowledgement that, hey, you are human first and foremost, no matter what you said, no matter what you do. And so I'm going to show up in a way that's respecting that. Back to the pandemic, I mean, there has been so much change, and so many people that I know at KU, for example, most of us have the privilege of working from home and have the privilege of sheltering in place, even though that's not the technical word. Even moving all of our equipment home, that took some time. I wasn't able to contact my 3 closest coworkers, our team, for a while. That took some patience and compassion on my part. When we show up in meetings now, sometimes we haven't gotten a lot of sleep lately. We're nervous. One of us is immunocompromised. She doesn't even want to leave the house. All these things, I can now look at folks compassionately, and that totally helps to calm me down, and it brings out the patience in me. And also, for my example, any type of situation that you feel activated, that that irritates you or frustrates you or off this chart scale angry, this can help. And I think I've seen a range of emotions from folks during this pandemic the last 2 to 3 months because of all the deaths and the fact that the virus is hitting Black and Brown communities much harder than other communities.
Right. Well, the worry that people have for folks in their own families or other parts of the country, and all those sorts of things. I mean, you could add 23 layers of all of the reasons why we might be activated at this moment.
Absolutely. And so I've been able to just sit with people and listen and not try to change them or tell them what to do or give them advice. Oh, you go read this article or go watch this YouTube video. I'm just sitting with them. And I have just listening to their pain. They're in pain. We are in pain right now, and pain shows up as fear. Pain shows up as anger. Pain shows up as protesting. So that's another big thing for me, using this type of communication guide. I've been able to be in empathy during these very tough times.
Oh, and
yeah.
And
it's developed in me ability to listen better to my fellow white people who don't understand and maybe have never done a lot of work on trying to understand the various complicated human phenomena that led to this national moment right now. I've been doing my own personal work around it for years and years, and so I may have a different understanding. But just like every human, we can't know everything. And so I'm able to open my heart out to other white people that might have questions and just don't
get it, right? Yeah, because well, and it also points to the fact that that there's always more to understand about a situation or an issue or a history of an issue or whatever it is. And so, you can sort of feel like you've gotten to some place of understanding, and then something blows up and you're like, seriously, this what? And sort of be frustrated about it. And, either we can be reactive and stop there, or we can be reactive. And then what you're saying is like, calm down a little bit and be reflective about what's going on with that. And, is it that I know that sometimes I get exhausted with the feeling that like, just when I thought I had a handle on something, it's all changing and now I've got more to learn, and how am I going to deal with that, and where am I going to find the time, and who do I even respect their work to like learn something from that, all these questions that get generated. And to know that, I can just feel that, but that doesn't need to be where I stop.
Right. It's not an end, it's a beginning. And you're right. This is compassionate communication. I will never stop learning. Larger social issues in our country, I will never stop learning. There's not an end point to say, okay, now I'm a compassionate person every day. I restart every day because we're all human beings and we're so complex and multidimensional.
Yeah. Thank you, Laurie.